Supply chain is often a topic that is neglected. So from my previous experience, where we had assessed more than 1,000 of such supply chain arrangements, in particular where cloud was underlying, we often found that there is unclarity about what is the depth of the supply chain, what are the associated risks across the supply chain, how these are managed, and how this could then impact an institution with regard to its resilience. So the topic is of an absolute importance, given that we have so many small supply chain members that often one is not even aware of, neither the supplier nor then the ultimate customer. And these small supply chain members, they can introduce a large risk up through the entire supply chain, because these risks that they may have are less understood, less well controlled. And this is also what attackers would exploit. Attackers typically know that where the weakest link is not at the top of the supply chain, but rather at the bottom, and that's where they then work on. Well, thank you. Listening to what we had discussed here in the conference, I think it's more than top three. I think there are, I counted at least 7 that one should be quite well aware of. I start off with risks. What is the understanding of risks? Is risk well understood throughout the organization, and how is it handled? Then the next one is governance. Establish a proper governance that would actually allow to deal with those risks. Then when you go down from governance, you would then look at politics. What is the impact of geography? What is the impact of the overall political environment across the world on all of what we are doing, and on our supply chain, and how that supply chain could then be vulnerable according to it? Then finally, what is the compliance requirements? So when we have gone through risks, governance, politics, how do we need to make sure that compliance is achieved? Compliance doesn't mean security. That's the next problem that one has to be aware of. And then the depth of the supply chain, the vulnerability of the supply chain, the resilience that comes from it. And last but not least, there is continuous monitoring requirement, because we have a big psychological impact on the actual behavior of people. And behavior of people is not what we typically think of. There is a psychological aspect that actually helps or distracts from security. Well, for me, it's the 3rd time that I'm attending here. I used to be in Madrid and in Dubai every time as panelist speaker. I think I recognize here more than half of the people coming back. So it's becoming like a trusted family where we interact with each other on a trust basis, where we share information, where we share experience, and it's the openness, the directness of the interaction, so the experience sharing and the challenging. I got nice challenging questions during my presentation now, so this is great. It is a very interactive and open and trusted environment. Each one of the participants has something to contribute. Now, coming from the Cloud Security Alliance, I can contribute my experience that I accumulated before actually working with the Cloud Security Alliance in the industry. But then many people here also look to me with regard to the standardization and the certification frameworks and the research frameworks that we support. Others here, we have vendors who actually showcase their specific products with an openness to discuss about how good these can actually address the challenges. And the big value then resulting out of that is we have so many representatives here of actual users. So industry customers, bank customers, institutional customers, government agencies who are here, who pose questions, who say, these are our challenges. Can we actually leverage any of the experiences that everybody here can bring to the table into discussion? That's where the big value comes out of it. We can share those experiences and people can take home actionable changes that they can implement in order to improve information security. That is what we are really about, making sure that our data or our customers' data or regulated data is protected in a better or more resilient way. In my findings to the challenges that I mentioned beforehand, so when we look at the first challenge, risks, understanding of risks, everybody talks about risks, but most people don't have a common understanding. Risk is so individual, like we are individuals, so you need to actually have a common denominator of what is a risk. For example, when I talk to a business person in a big industrial company, their risks are, I need to deliver for my customers. And I might tell them, well, but if your data isn't secure, your customer may actually reprimand you because you lost their data. And then they think, oh yeah, true, that is a risk. But they didn't think of that risk, or at least not quantify the risk. And that's another finding. You need to be able to quantify in a business understandable language or in a customer understandable language and not in a techie talk language. So that is one finding that we talked about actually quite well in the conference. Then the second, governance. It seems so simple. Yes, you need to be able to govern your risk, to govern your controls, to govern your contracts and so on. But what it takes in order to be able to do so is you need to first make sure that everybody up there in your top management really is on the same page with regard to the risk, with regard to what needs to be done, with the controls and with the impact. So you may have the owner of a vendor playing golf with your CEO and then complaining about all these compliance questionnaires, which are crazy, stupid, nobody wants those. And then you need to have your CEO actually understand and be part of that governance and then tell the vendor, well, look, this is also to your benefit, because if you improve security, you get less breached. We are more safe, you are more safe, you have more customers, we have more customers. So it's a win-win situation. Then going into the topic of the political environment, you may deal, in particular when it's a global institution, with many vendors across the globe. Now, these vendors typically have their data on some cloud environment. Now, where are the cloud hyperscalers? The cloud hyperscalers are concentrated in mostly two economies. Both of these economies use political instruments in order to make sure that their interests get represented well. So what happens if one of those economies would determine that cloud providers are no longer good to service customers in a certain area of the world? That may have an impact on your supply chain, and you may, even if you are not in that area, you may impact it and your resiliency goes down. So it is quite relevant for you. We discussed that as well yesterday. These concentration, resilience, political triangle matter to your business. Then when we look into the compliance world, most of us assess our supply chain. We would expect them to respond to huge questionnaires, evaluate, raise findings, and so on. But that doesn't mean that they are secure, because number one, those questionnaires, they may not be targeted to the regulations, even if they are targeted to the regulations that we have to actually work against. The evaluation of those responses may be very tricky and may require special skills. One might be inclined to use AI for it. Artificial intelligence is as good as what you feed it with. So if you feed it with policies and procedures which are very high level, then the responses that you get to the questionnaires will be very high level, and you as a customer cannot actually do much with it. If you use AI to evaluate those, then you have AI controlling AI, which is not ideal, except you have a very well-trained AI model that has auditing knowledge. That's not yet something that is there. It may come eventually, but at the moment it is not yet available. So what this means is you as a customer need to actually know exactly what are your top challenges which you need to audit and how you need to audit them. You need to have specialist skills on the place, which is expensive and takes lots of time. Therefore, also one of the takeouts that we had here is, can we simplify that? Yes, there are simplifications possible, for example, using certification frameworks, but the current certification frameworks, they are not specific enough in order to address the challenges that regulatory demands to highly regulated industries such as healthcare, government, banks, and so on may pose. Therefore, we are working on new certification frameworks which go deeper to that extent, and the Cloud Security Alliance that I'm representing here is actually offering something as a non-profit organization that addresses such requirements. So there is much development going on, which we discussed to that extent, and we can certainly with that make sure that the life of all those who need to do supply chain compliance becomes better. What is definitely then a topic that needs to be looked at is the psychological effects of all of those cyber threats. And as stupid as it may sound, or as surprising as it may sound, there is a congruency in terms of why we are vulnerable as users versus, or actually congruent with, what hackers want to achieve. We all look for appreciation. So we want to showcase on social media what good job we have done, what we have achieved, what our company is doing. Now that feeds information that intruders may actually leverage and utilize in order to actually perform their intrusion. And with this, many controls that are technically there could be actually jumped over by having or leveraging psychological effects or the information that gets collected out of such psychological effects. So that's again something we looked at yesterday: behavioral change, mindset change, information scarcity. What do we publish on social media, for example, may help improving resilience, may help improving information security. And finally, it's no good to actually do that in snapshots. We need to do it much more continuously. So all of the controls that we may want to achieve, all of the security that we want to achieve through those controls, all the contractual details that we may want to observe, we need to monitor it much more frequently than what is currently done with the snapshot-based assessment and then re-auditing and remediation. It needs to be more continuous, and for that, of course, technologies are not yet there that would feed the information that we need in order to make sure that all of our regulated requirements are actually observable. The technology that is currently there uses public information. That doesn't give us any possibility to monitor, for example, how access control is done in a service, which is relevant for, can we track whether somebody is intruding into our data? Or it doesn't give us the possibility to say, is there an integration of incident management across the board from the bottom of the supply chain to us as a customer? That is at the moment not yet there. So these are aspects that are worked on, that we also discussed are needed, and where initiatives are currently underway, and which will be quite relevant in order to ensure information security at a much higher level.